So I wanted to chat a little bit about what makes someone a good negotiator, because I think this is something that many people say they look for in an agent, but have a hard time figuring out who exactly is great at negotiations and how do you determine if someone's great at negotiations. And I think the first thing is just really unpacking what makes a great negotiator. So I think a lot of people think that, you know, the person who's a great negotiator is the one that just says, this is my bottom line, take it or leave it, and is very firm and is no nonsense, and you either, it's my offer or nothing. And the reality is that's actually a terrible negotiator. That is not a very good negotiator. I think we see that on television. We think that's the tough lawyer, the tough what, you know, but this is not very good negotiation. The good negotiator does not start the conversation with no. A good negotiator starts conversations or barriers with why, okay? And, you know, what do I mean by that? A good negotiator is not trying to, you know, persuade someone into something that they don't want to do. They're trying to understand the barrier from two people who can come to an agreement on something, but there's something in the way, and they're trying to solve that puzzle, right? And I'll give you one example that's a pretty simple one that I encountered a long time ago when I was kind of very new in this business. I remember a couple of clients of mine, they were looking at buying a condominium. It's the perfect condo for them. They were downsizing from their home. You know, it was a beautiful condominium. We were making an offer on it. And we needed a long closing date. They needed about 90 days because once they bought the condo, they also needed to sell their current home. So we couldn't close very quickly. So, you know, we made our offer. We needed a 90-day closing. And after some back and forth, you know, us and the seller agreed on the price, but the seller came back and said, nope, I can't do this closing date. I need 45 days, right? That's it, take it or leave it. So the listing agent said to me, this is it, final offer, take it or leave it. And I went back to him and said, well, why can't he do 45 days? Or why can't the seller accept a longer 90-day closing? And the seller's agent just said, well, that's what he told me, take it or leave it. I don't know, he wants a short closing, that's it, you know what I mean? And I didn't let it rest. I said, listen, you need to go back to him. Like, you need to find out why. Why 45, like, and there could be legitimate reasons for a seller not being able to wait longer. Maybe he's bought a home and he needs to close quickly as well. Maybe he's gonna be out of the country. Maybe there are all sorts of reasons. So after some pushing of the seller's agent, finally the seller's agent came back and he said, okay, this is the problem. He doesn't want to close in 90 days because he's actually going to move out of the condo and he just doesn't want it to sit empty for a month and a half and have to pay his property taxes and his maintenance fees and his mortgage. I said, okay, so how much are his property taxes, maintenance fees, and his mortgage? He's like, I don't know, let me find out. So he asks his client, he comes back and he says, well, it's going to cost him about $2,000 a month. So I said, okay, well, if we gave you $3,000 above our current price, which covers his costs for an extra month and a half, would he be open to that? And he went back to the seller, and the seller said, yeah, 100%. And, you know, and again, I think this is an example of how on paper we think this other agent is like the tough negotiator because he's just saying no, but he's actually the barrier in his client selling his property at a price that he's happy with because he's not asking his client the questions that he should be asking. You know, why? Why is the closing date a barrier? And, you know, this is one example with the closing date. Of course, in a lot of situations, you know, the barrier is price. But even in these situations, again, you know, we're not in one-on-one negotiations as much in Toronto when the market's over-competitive and homes have 20 offers on them. But there are periods when the market's slower and we're negotiating one-on-one. And we're dealing with properties that we think are overpriced, right? So even in those situations when we're negotiating and the seller has come back with their final price and we think it's too high, you know, even in those situations, we need to go back as agents and say why. You know, we go back with the listing agent and say, well, explain to me why this is your bottom. Like, why do you or your client think your house is worth this much? What comparables did you use? You help me persuade my client. You know, we try to look cooperative in many ways, right? But we're doing that because we're trying to learn what they're thinking and what their barrier is. You know, and once we learn that, we can come back and say, okay, this is why we disagree with you, and we're telling our story about why we think they're wrong. And sometimes it bridges the gap, and of course sometimes it doesn't. I mean, this is negotiations, but the point is a good negotiator is always asking why and is always trying to bridge the gap and is not starting an impasse or a barrier by saying no, and this is it. So when you're thinking about working with agents, I think this is an important thing to think about when you're interviewing them. And in the next video, I'm going to talk about how we can spot some of these trends and tendencies in agents and how they react to difficult questions, and is their first reaction to say no or to explore and to ask why. And we're going to chat about that in the next video.
I hope you found that buyer tip helpful. If you're buying a home in the Toronto area's very competitive housing market and want an edge, sign up for my free 1-hour webinar on the top 10 strategies that are going to give you that advantage. You're going to learn the number one thing that you need to know in deciding what price to offer on a home, why price alone is not the only factor that leads someone to win in a multiple offer situation, and how to find value in good homes that other buyers overlook. Click the link above or below to sign up now to give yourself that advantage in Toronto's housing market.